namely Free Will versus Destiny, which we'll hear from Ashwini, and Chronology of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Rigveda from Nilesh Nilkantok. They have joined us from their house in Atlanta. My acquaintance with Ashwini, as I've told some of you, goes back to my L&T days, where I knew her as a brilliant chartered accountant, working on some very challenging assignments. Ashwini subsequently did her CPA, migrated to the US, and gave wings to her, so to say, childhood dream of working on a totally different subject, that is empirical astrology, which today is a trademark area of specialization. Currently, she is an avid practitioner in Vedic astrology. Ashwini's husband, Nilesh Nilkantok, is today, many of you know, is a household name in our country. During his several tours in India, he has been giving captivating lectures on some very important facets of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vedas, and our other scriptures, on which he has done extensive research over the last about 25 years. He makes it a point to validate his theories through scientific evidence, which makes it all the more appealing to his audience. Nilesh is an MS in chemical engineering, besides being an MBA. No wonder that he possesses a scientific bent of mind, which he uses profusely while analyzing and proving the mythological events so ably. He has also authored a number of books which have received wide acclaim. Now, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of each talk, once after Ashwini's talk and again after Nilesh's talk. And of course, you can ask questions at that time by unmuting yourself, because we all will be on mute mode. However, you can also post your question on the chat box. So with this, may I request Ashwini and Nilesh to kindly take over, and thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar to everyone. Good morning from Atlanta and good evening to India. Thank you for having us. I'll quickly take you all through a small presentation that I have made for the group. And I think I can share now. So just... Can you all see?
Yes, Ashwini.
Okay. I'm just trying to put. So I thought the best way is to address the two very frequently asked questions to me as an practicing astrologer for the last 12 years. By my students, I also teach astrology, and also by clients, but anywhere that we go for conversations. So the first one being, is it a science? So people everybody has this question, is it a science, or it is like just like some parrot, bringing out a card and telling me my future? Yes, no, yes, this will happen, or it will not happen. So that is the first question. And the second is, if everything is predestined, then why bother? If there is God or somebody out there who's decided things for us, then why should we bother about doing anything, or trying? Or so these are the critical questions. Let's try to address them one. So is it a science? Now, before finding out what is science and whether astrology fits into the definition, let me take you through the fundamentals of astrology, just to so that we can arrive at a conclusion of what it is or what it could be. So astrology, we know today astronomy and astrology as different fields, but way back, say 40,000 years ago, it was known as Jyotish, and they both were a part of Jyotish. And typically the Vedic Jyotish is divided into three parts. The first two parts are more to do with the calculation part. The Siddhanta or the Ganita Skanda, as the name says, Ganita, is the calculation of the position of the planets, the degrees on which they are, the Spashta Graha, and the Samvita is the motion of the planets, the overall effect of the planets, the shooting stars, the comets, on the entire world at large. So these are the two parts which are more astronomy focused. The third part that we normally interact with is the Jatak Skanda or the Phala Jyotish or the predictive astrology, where we find the effects of the planets on the stars on the overall life of the person, and that is where you possibly will meet an astrologer to tell and ask him questions about what effect this Mahadasha has, or etc. etc. So Jyotish can be traced as I said to 40,000 years ago, where it was used for trade, commerce, navigation. The Phala Jyotish, that is a Vedic astrology, which is based on the star system, can be traced to Ramayana times, 14,000 years ago. At least, we don't know how much before, but definitely 14,000 years before. So what is this horoscope or Kundali? What exactly it is? So it is basically geocentric in nature, that is as seen from the earth, because we are doing it for a person who is born on the earth, and it reflects the position and stars of the position of the stars and the planets at the time, at the place, and on the date of the birth of that particular jatak or individual. So that it is basically that. And why I'm taking you through this is to kind of arrive at that answer, whether it's a science or whether it's an art or it's just a intuitive based, or what is it. It has a lot of permutation combinations. So it has a combination of the rashis, that is zodiac signs, the 12 houses or the bhav, the 27 nakshatras or the stars or the constellations, and the 12 planets or the graha. Now each one's horoscope will have all of this, but how they will play out in each one's life will be different. And that's where the answer is, the question whether it is a science. So of course, this is like a cosmic chemistry where every planet, while moving in its orbit, will create a vibration. In, like, for example, now we are going through winter here in Atlanta, and many a times, like, the next entire week is supposed to be cloudy, rainy, and it's kind of dull. It has a dull impact on your mind also. But when sun comes out, sometimes you feel good. So that is even a simple effect that we can observe. Of course, we also know that lunatics, they get hyper during new moon or full moon times. That is also very well established. High tide, low tide. So similarly, each planet, while rotating, creates vibrations, and which can have an influence on the life of every individual, which is known as cosmic chemistry. So this entire ecliptic, that is the Earth's path of rotation, which is 360 degrees, is divided into these 12 signs, zodiac signs of 30 degrees, the 27 nakshatras of approximately 13 degrees 20 minutes, the 12 bhavas or the houses of 30 degrees, and which means that each sign will have 2.5 nakshatra in it. So all I'm trying to bring out is the, not like kind of telling what is astrology, but bringing out the complexity and the kind of permutation and the combination that goes in any kind of prediction or any kind of analysis. So typically one horoscope, it takes about 4 to 5 days to do a complete analysis. It's not that, okay, just see my horoscope and tell me what's going to happen next year. That's not possible. And if ever somebody is doing that, then there is a likelihood that he'll be making mistake. He or she will be making mistake, because a thorough analysis does need 3 to 4 days. So the moon, at the sign in which the moon is at the time of birth, the sign in which the sun is at the time of the birth, the dashas, that is the transit periods, the sub-transit periods, the gochar brahman, that is the daily transit, the daily motion of the sun, moon, they all play a role in giving out the predictions and how they affect the life of an individual. Now, so what is a science? Let's come to the definition of science as seen in Wikipedia. So in Wikipedia, science comes from a Latin word meaning knowledge. It's a systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of explanations which are testable. So there is a knowledge which is getting built from the knowledge emerges explanations which are tested, and based on the test results, the predictions are made about the universe. And I think astrology perfectly fits into this definition of science. So, what do I call astrology? I call astrology empirical. It is an empirical science. And what is empirical? Empirical means what can be noted, what can be observed, what can be tracked, the rishis in the past, the sages, used to track horoscopes. It is said that Bhrigu Rishi has documented 500,000 horoscopes. And the documentation of these horoscopes led to the science, Shastra, the Parashar Hora Shastra, the Bhrigu Samhita, the Jaimini Shastra, and the modern Shastras like Murti or the Lal Kitab, etc. So I feel empirical because I have clients for the last 10 years where I have tracked, what has happened in their lives versus what I had predicted. So it can be easily noted and tracked. They say about 80% of the people believe in astrology, though it involves a lot of skepticism also. And I get all those kind of questions also, is it really true? How does a planet which is so many million years away affect us, etc.? But it does affect. And then there are humongous rules as to how it will affect every individual. So let's try to, I've tried to put it pictorially, an entire astrology and the prediction part of it. So here we have the discipline of astrology with the Hora Shastra, the Parashar, the Jaimini. So the Parashar Hora Shastra itself is a 1,000-page book with more than 90 chapters, That itself is a lifetime of reading. You cannot finish or remember that also in one lifetime. That is so much of rules and rules and rules. So the discipline of astrology gives the guidelines. I call the empirical guidelines, which of course have to be changed or tweaked with time. Because, for example, a particular guideline says if Shani is so and so position, the marriage will be late. But late in what context? Probably thousands of years ago, where marriage at 18 was late, but not today, right? Today it's okay to get married at 30. So that has to be tweaked to kind of suit the current times, so that is the empirical guidelines. Then you have the astrologer who interprets these guidelines for every individual that comes to him or her. And that is where the crux is, the interpretation. Had it been an exact science like 2 + 2 = 4, one can could have just put it in a software, the date, place, and time, and the entire prediction about everybody would have just come out, and you wouldn't have needed any astrologer. But the interpretation part, that is where the skill and the practice lies, So by interpreting these guidelines, the propensities are predicted. So I would never say this will happen. I would always say there is a very high chance that this will happen, or there is a very low chance that this will not happen in your life. So these propensities are predicted, the consultation outcome happens, and there is a constant synthesis between this outcome with the seeker, the person who is asking the question, and with the astrologer. So that tracking happens. One can track for years. I have, it starts with one person, then the family joins in. So it's a family like a 4, 3, 2, where the entire life I've been tracking for the last 10 years of a few horoscopes, not everybody, but I would say at least 20% of my clients are there with me for more than 10 years. And what is most important is, which I have personally experienced, so I learned astrology from Ranade sir, from Mumbai, who was a banker, he's no more. He was a State Bank of India banker, and he practiced astrology for more than 40 years. His father was a professional astrologer. So him and his colleagues, and I was with him for 5 years practicing with him. So what we all have experienced is that sadhana or tapasya or meditation definitely improves the quality of predictions. So what I would have been able to predict 15 years ago and now is completely different. And we kind of hone the skills, we kind of know exactly where to lay the emphasis. For example, there will be a Saturn Mahadasha in everybody's life. There will be a Rahu in everybody's horoscope. But how it will affect each one will be definitely different, either positively or negatively or neutrally. So that is where the astrologer becomes proficient with more and more meditation or sadhana. So I spend a lot of time in mantra chanting, in meditation, every day on a daily basis, which helps me into, honing my skills. So I think that that's the first question. So I think to sum it, according to me, it's very much empirical in nature. It's very much a science which can be tracked, which can be improved, which can be observed, and very, very close, though may not be an exact 2 + 2 4, but definitely has an empirical nature in it. Let's come to the second question. Okay, I just have a few more things. So is every astrologer accurate all the time? So according to me, I don't think any astrologer is accurate all the times and 100% of the times. So I would say I have achieved in the last, I keep a scorecard of my predictions. So I probably have achieved 85 to 90% accuracy in the predictions that I have made. And as I said, it's an adhyatmic journey. It's a spiritual journey. One needs to be at it, keep doing the sadhana tapasya. Now let's come to the second question. Is everything predestined? If God has decided everything for us, why do we need to do anything? Why do we need to even go to an astrologer? So this is also very, very, very frequently asked question by all my students, most of my clients, and wherever we go for lectures or whatever. So why bother? Now, what is the role of free will? Here, I think we should take help of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, which talks of a lot of fundamental principles, karma yoga being one of them, karmebhyashta diko yogi. So gives us the importance of karma yoga. So I'll take you through a couple of fundamentals of Bhagavad Gita, which will help us in addressing this question, whether if everything is predestined, then why bother? Even before going to Bhagavad Gita, let me quote Yoga Vasishtha. So Yoga Vasishtha, which is a document of sage Rishi Vasishtha's teachings to Ram to elevate him in a spiritual journey. He goes into quotes that self-effort can be divided into two categories. One of the past lives and one of the current life. Both counterplay each other. Whichever is more important triumphs. He goes ahead to say that the fruition of self-effort by which we experience the good and the evil of our past actions is called daivam or fate. But further, he goes ahead to say that whatever one can achieve or whatever is achieved in this life is achieved through self-effort. Wherever we see a failure, it is because of slackness of effort. We call it daivam, which is fictitious. So Yoga Vasishtha goes to an extreme saying that fate is fictitious. So coming back to the Gita, what does Krishna have to say? So the fundamental principle of Atma. So the Purush and Prakriti. The Purush we know as the Chetana, the primordial consciousness, which is engulfed in the Maya, the Prakriti. We are individual Atmas. We are the individual consciousness or the Chetana in the form of Atma. So what is the importance of Atma? Krishna goes and says, Nainam chindanti shastrani, Nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marutaha. So the Atma cannot be broken by weapons, destroyed by fire, or drenched by water, or neither can be withered by wind. He goes on to say, explaining the cycle of life and death by saying that Jatasya hi dhruvar mrityu, dhruvam janmam mritasya cha. Whoever takes birth dies, and whoever dies definitely takes birth again. This is inevitable, so there is no point in mourning over it. What is the journey? So he describes the journey of Atma as Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grunhati naroparani. Just as a human being throws the old worn clothes and wears new ones, the Atma does the same. It's like a car and driver. The car is the body and the Atma is the driver. It drives the body everywhere. Further, he goes to say that Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantar praptir dhiras tatra na muhyati. The Atma, the Jivatma, who goes through the body, through the childhood, through the youth, the old age, will acquire another body. So people who know this truth do not get deluded, do not with the moha or the maya of the body. So in short, what is he saying? Of course, he goes on to say the crux of it is bahuni me vatitani janmani tava charjuna. So I and you, Arjun, have taken many births. I remember and you don't. And that's where the crux is. So we kind of try to map our life only in this birth, because we say, oh, I have taken so much effort. why this has happened to me. We always ask a question, why, when something bad happens. When something good happens, we never ask why. We enjoy that moment, and that's rightfully so, we should. But we kind of try to think that, oh, my fruits, I'm not getting fruits of my result, my effort is not getting rewarded. We don't know what we've done in the past. So somebody like Krishna, evolved soul, knew all his past lives. We just don't know, because we are ordinary souls. We see, each one of us is on our spiritual path, different levels, So the first fundamental is, it is not one life. So even when we do astrology, I'll tell you how this principle is extremely important while doing, even practicing astrology. Not one life, Atma travels from one body to another. And okay, so coming to astrology, how does this help me? So we know that our body, we have the 5 koshas. Prana Kosh, we have the Anna Kosh, we have the Vijnana Kosh, the Ananda Kosh, and the Mana Kosh. So impressions of some of these koshas are transferred from one life to another. The Atma takes it with it. And that's what Krishna says, Tatatam Buddhi Sayogam Labhate Paurva Yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddho kurunandana. So, this is what I actually analysis.
Subject to some specified conditions.
Yes, I have quoted
that bank will not get depreciation.
I have quoted this section.
Some,
So we
yeah.
have to calculate the net effect actually after giving effect 30%, 34%, or 22%.
I think somebody is talking, is it?
Has to be calculated.
Meena Sharma ji, please mute yourself. Please mute. आपका mute नहीं है.
I don't know whether it's a question or if they're talking.
No, I think there was background noise.
Okay, no problem. So, even while coming back to this principle of the Atma carrying the previous impressions of its previous lives, I find it in the horoscopes. See, whatever question I get, be it based for, so people come for career questions, education, health, wealth, relationships, marriage, matchmaking, children, all kinds of whatever life that we lead. The questions are there at every stage in life. Whatever the question is, the first thing I will do is map their personalities. I will find out what, even most of them I have not even met, especially nowadays with COVID, most of my clients for the last 1 year I have not even met, I've not seen them, I've only spoken on the phone. So I do their personality mapping where I try to find out their strengths, weaknesses, the likely. So for example, somebody may be hot tempered, somebody is balanced, somebody likes outdoor sports, somebody is more comfortable with indoors, somebody has inclination to medicine. So these kinds of personalities, and the likely threats that person may face in life, the likely opportunities the person may face in life. So the first thing I do, I'll map the entire horoscope for the personality. And here is where I do a scorecard. So for example, this is probably a couple of years ago, and I've just randomly selected nine horoscopes where see, for the first horoscope, I could tell 40 things. For the second, I could tell only 22. So it is not necessary that I will be able to tell everything, every parameter about every person. There is certain story which come out very prominently, and sometimes it doesn't. They're silent. The horoscope is pretty silent. So this scorecard shows that possibly on an average, I would have scored about 90% accuracy. I probably gave 299 predictions in these 9 horoscopes about the personality of that person. 276 came right and 23 came wrong. So now how does this help, this personality mapping? Because the personality kind of influences the decision making of that person. So depending upon how you are, you're likely to take decisions. So now you will ask me, so if my personality is decided, what can I do? No, the stars and the planets will give an indication. It's like the weather, you see, is it going to rain today? So there's an indication whether actually it will rain or not, whether you're able to overcome your weaknesses and capitalize on your strength is your next fundamental principle of Bhagavad Gita. That's where the answer is. So, Krishna says, na kartutvam na karmani, lokasya srujati prabhu, na karma phala sayogam swabhavastu pravartate. So the karma, the results of the karma, the achievements, I don't do anything. I don't even make you do the karma, nor do I give you the results of the karma. It is the material nature, the prakruti, the sattva, raja, tama guna in each of us that makes us do things. So that is why he tells us to rise beyond the raja and tama and go to the sattvic level where we give away the fruits also. We renounce the fruits of the action. That's where we all need to reach. As I said, we are on different levels in the karmic or the spiritual journey. So you just imagine a skyscraper, a 100-storied skyscraper, where I'm on the first floor, somebody on the fifth, somebody is in the basement, somebody has not even reached the building. And the ultimate aim of each of our atma, each jivatma, is to come out of this cycle of birth and life. So that's why. So how do we, so who helps us? So Krishna says, I don't do anything. So then who? So he says, Uddharen atmanam avasadayet, atmeva yatmano bandhur, atmeva ripuratmanam. So one should use the divine strength of one's own atma to uplift one's own atma, because atma is our best friend and atma can be our worst enemy. So where, people who are a little weak, where it is seen in the horoscope, the Chandra is Dushit. So they themselves are not able to uplift themselves. So it's very beautifully explained in the Gita. So how do we conduct our life? So what Krishna says is adhishthanam tatha karta, karanam cha prithakvidam, vividhascha prithak cheshta, daivam chaivatra panchamam. So here there is a reference of daivam or fate in this shlok in the 18th chapter. So what did we say? There are 5 different factors which are required to achieve success. One is adhishthan, goal or a path. One is karta, that is you yourself. The karana, that is all our 10 bodily senses, the jnanendriya, the karmendriya, the mana, buddhi, ahankar, everything. Then is a cheshta, the various methods. For example, I want to pass an exam. I will get books, I will take coaching classes, I will write, I will practice, I will buy heart, I will do so many things, to be able to pass that exam. And he says the 5th is daivam, that is fate. So 20%. But I would say this daivam is also the result of all your past karmas in your past lives. Because if they are good, the daivam will work in your favor. If not, how much ever you try, it will not. But it is to do with your own karma. It has nothing to do with him out there doing it for you. So that daivam I would also attribute to completely your own karmas of the past life, the 20% that he says. So what in short, what? It is the karma that creates the destiny. It is destiny because of free will. It is never destiny versus free will. That's my conclusion on, on what I have read so far. And I'm from the accounting field. PSB sir, if I made any mistake, please forgive me. But I tried last year to map this entire karma yoga, what Krishna tells us, into a balance sheet. So what is he trying to tell us? So as we all know, we are all from the corporate world. The balance sheet typically has a liability side and an asset side. The liabilities have equity, loans. The fixed asset, the assets are fixed assets, and I've just taken the broad categories. So equity, I would say, is the balance of all our past life karmas, assuming it's all positive and we've done something good. And that's why we come here and we are leading a good life, So this is our purva sanchit, the balance of all our past life karmas. The loans is something, the karmas of the ancestors that you can draw from. They are available to you, you can use them if required. The fixed assets is you yourself, your body, your mind, your intellect, your emotions, your convictions, what you're convinced about, etc. And the working capital is your current birth situation, the current life in which you have taken birth, your parents, your family, your extended family, the society in which you are born, the resources, all that is a working capital. So this is what we come with. This is what the mapping that I do, with every horoscope that I get. Now so then we come into this life and lead this life. And our Sanatan Dharma actually talks of 3 fundamental principles of leading our life. One is Achar Sahiஷ்nuta, that is endurance in conduct. Vichara Swatantra, that is freedom of thought, free will. Everywhere it's free will. And third is Niti Dharma Drudata, that is convictions, our conviction in the righteousness, what we think is right and wrong. And based on these three principles, we lead our current life. And I map our current life from the day we are born till the day we die to the profit and loss account. That is our income statement, annual income statement, the life income statement. Now, if in our overall life, if our net karma is a profit, it gets added to equity and carried forward. If it is a loss, it gets reduced from equity and gets carried forward. And, in astrology also, there are a few houses that we have to study for the past karmic balances and for the future possibilities. But I would, word of caution, the present can change the future. That is something that even Krishna says, it is up to us to change. So we have this life. The karma is so important. Krishna tells us. So how do we lead our life? So he says, Niyatam kuru karmatvam, karma jayo iha karmanah, sharira yatra pichatena, prasiddhyeda akarmana. So you should perform your prescribed daily duties, since action is superior to inaction. There are so many verses where he says action is superior to inaction. Na karmana manaramba neshkarmam pushro shrute, na cha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhigacchati. So many such more. So, and what karma do I do? What should I do? Somebody has a doubt. What should I do? So, Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha, Paradharmat Svanashtrita. Do what naturally comes to you, where your passion lies, where you think you can excel. It is better to do what naturally comes to you rather than trying to copy somebody else, is what he tries to say. He goes on to say that how do I do my work? I mean, he tells us how to do our work. Yoga karma sukaushanam. Do that to the best of your ability with as perfection as possible, as much perfection as possible. He goes on ahead to say, Name parthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam varta eva cha karmani. That is, I have no duty. I am beyond sattva raja tama. So, I don't have anything to gain or attain, yet I'm engaged in prescribed duties. He also tells, I think in the 18th or the 16th chapter, that I can be a Upadrushta, Anumanta, Bharta, Bhokta, or a Maheshwar. So if I just sit here saying that, everything is predestined, I'm not going to do anything, he will also sit there. He'll also not do anything for you or in favor of you. But if I take some effort, that is Upadrushta. If I start taking some effort, he'll be a Anumanta. He'll nod his head in approval. Good. If I start taking really rigorous effort, following my passion, my dream goal, he'll be a Upadrushta Anumanta Bhokta. Upadrushta Anumanta Bharta. He will protect us. He'll be a protector. So Bharta. Then I'll start enjoying the fruits of my result. He will be a Bhokta. He will also enjoy with me. Krishna says, I will also enjoy it with you. But he wants us to be sattvic, right? He wants us to rise beyond the raja and tama. So he says, when you become sattvic, that is when you give away the fruits, when you renounce the fruits of your action, I will become one with you, or you will become one with me. I will become Maheshwar. Sarva bhuktaram yajna tapasam sarva loka Maheshwaram. That's what he says. So it's ultimately the takeaway from the Gita is, and also to most of my clients, I say, by constantly striving to be on the right path, we will be unconsciously changing or shaping our destiny. And how much importance to free will and karma yoga? You cannot, there are no enough words, to re-emphasize, even at the end of Bhagavad Gita. So Arjun starts with the Vishada Yoga, saying that, Sidantim magatrani mukham cha parishushati vepatthusya sharire me roma harshashcha jayate. So I'm scared, I'm like trembling. I cannot fight my ancestors, I will just go to hell or whatever. So from there, he explains Sankhya, he explains Karma, he explains Bhakti Yoga, Vibhuti Yoga, and all the 18 chapters. At the end of 18 chapter, Krishna goes to say, Itite jnanam akyatam guhyat guhyat tara, guhyat guhyataram maya, vimrushaita dasheshena yathechasi tatha kuru. So he goes on to say, Arjun, I've explained to you the Sankhya, the philosophy of Sankhya, Karma, Bhakti, Jnana. It is a very deep knowledge. You mull over it, contemplate on it, and do what you think is right. At the end of it, he gives that free will weapon to Arjun to decide what is the right thing to do. So it's like, you are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so are your deeds. And as are your deeds, so is your destiny. This is in the Upanishad. Aranyaka Upanishad. And so I think it's free will that creates destiny in sum and substance. So thank you. I'm done. Any questions? So I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you, Ashwini. If anybody has a question, please ask. She has raised a lot of interesting topic points, so I'm sure there should be questions.
Just trying to figure out how to stop sharing.
You've stopped sharing already.
Okay.
Close your file.
I did.
Any questions, please?
Since nobody is asking, I can ask.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have an understanding with Samir. When nobody asks this question, I have to ask.
Yes.
Actually, when you started the presentation, one thing was in the mind that everything is destiny. So if this is destiny, what can I do? You know, like the common refrain. But by the end of your talk, it was very clear that through your own karma, your own efforts, your own will, you can change the destiny, and that's very good. That's the understanding. Hope I'm right in understanding.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So karma yoga is so very important. Free will. What is important is being in the framework of righteousness. So our dharma teaches us the right. It's dharma, right? It is our Hindu Sanatan. It's a dharma. It's not even a religion. It just tells us the path of being right. So that is why we are able to worship anybody. We can worship the sea, the trees, Krishna. I'm a Devi Bhakta, Durga Devi Bhakta. So, but I have a choice to worship my guru also, if I have one. So in that sense, yes, it's very much our own karma. I think that leads to the so-called, we call it destiny, because we don't know what has happened in the past. So every day we are creating our destiny. In the sense, every day we are doing karmas right from the day we are born till we go, kind of shaping our life.
Like Arjuna, you will win the war, the battle, but you have to fight.
Yes.
You have to fight. And then the end result will be you win. And the other thing which came out loud and clear from your karmic balance sheet is that the good life that we are enjoying today is largely due to the good work done by our parents and ancestors, which we are drawing to an extent, and the good work we have ourselves done.
Yes.
And which also means that if we continue to do good work, our children and the next generations will benefit immensely. Is that right?
Yes, to my limited understanding, yes, and in fact, at end of every chapter, Krishna says, "Go and fight, go and fight." If you fight and if you are killed, you will go to Swarga. If you are, if you win, you will rule the world. So every end of every Bhagavad Gita, he says, "Go and fight." So do your karma. That is most important. And yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Ashwini, I have a question, and this may not be directly relevant in this particular topic that you were taking up, but let's look at this question of destiny and the specific situation in my horoscope, for example. And then quite often we hear of astrologers telling us कि अमुक मंदिर में चले जाइए या अमुक पूजा करवा लीजिए. How does this change the planetary impact or the influence on my present situation?
True. So our dharma has been from Vedic times, right? And a lot of Vedic rituals and yajnas and everything were prescribed in that kind of format. So and they have value. So they definitely have value if being done in the right way. However, even Krishna says, Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna. Go even beyond the Vedas, which are also engulfed in the Sattva Rajat Tama. So go even beyond that. And he goes to say, Yavan artha udakpane sarvata samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanata. So suppose you have water everywhere. I'll come to the answer, but just to give a context, you have water everywhere and there is a well. There is full river and there is a well nearby. What importance does that well have? The same importance the Vedas have for a realized soul. So in short, he's trying to say, go beyond even the Vedic rituals. So our sages have also prescribed the Bhakti Yoga, right? For the common man. So everybody is not equipped to learn the Vedas. Everybody is not equipped to understand the Vedas, all of us. So Bhakti, that is the Bhakti Marg, is also extremely important. And so doing the puja and all is fine. But if the person who is doing the puja, the Pandit who is conducting the puja, doesn't do it rightly for whatever reasons, then it loses its meaning. Secondly, whether the planets will change is your question, right? So I normally prescribe mantra chanting. I'm a very big follower of any mantra. It doesn't have to be the mantra that I say. Your Ishta Devata, your Kula Devata, the person, the Deva you follow, the mantra of that Dev or a Devata or a Devi can be followed. It changes your aura. It changes the aura of the house. And the grahas may not change. The situation may not change. It may not be in your control, but your reaction to the situation, your ability to address the situation, your ability to fight the situation, solve the situation definitely improves. And that is proven, like at least in my life, in many of my clients who do mantra chanting, according to what is suitable to their horoscope or according to whom they want to worship, it has definitely improved their life. So much so as, skin allergies have gone. I mean, this very recent, a couple of months back, even the skin allergy with the mantra chanting has gone. So the positions at the time of birth will not change, because those are the positions at the time, date, and place when you were born. They will remain, but you will definitely be able to handle it in a better way.
Ashwini, some questions in the chat box. Can you see?
I can see.
I just
Chat.
want to ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You said when somebody, supposing I want to get some havan done for home Shanti, and the Pandit who's doing is not doing it correctly, and I'm not very good at it either. So how will it affect the whole thing that I have planned to do? How is it going to affect it?
Simple answer is I don't know, because neither I know any Vedic havans. What I believe is, what I believe and what I've experienced is so the Pandit can do havan, etc. for your what is in the mind. Mentally, if you get a feeling that he's done it right and things will improve, that will happen. So your mind is a seed to whether that problem will get solved or no. That is very clear. So that you can either achieve by, doing some reference check of the Pandit and making him do it, or you yourself doing an upasana or a sadhana, you yourself doing a mantra sadhana or a meditation, or, going into dhyan or whatever. That I can say, but how good is a Pandit or what correct ritual, even I don't know. I wouldn't.
Yeah, Ashwini, there are a couple of interesting questions in the comments in the chat.
Oh, okay.
If you want to go through.
Okay.
If you cannot find, I can read it to you.
Astrological predictions in the face of. Okay, why is that the predictions from different astrologers vary for a given chart? As I said, there are various streams of astrology. There is Jaimini, there is Parashar, there is Krishnamurti, there is Lal Kitab, there is Varaha Mihir. Also, the interpretation of various astrologers would differ. It shouldn't. Theoretically, it shouldn't. But it does. Yeah. No. Why? Very difficult to answer. It's a very good question as to why it differs. So there are people clients who come to me who say, I've asked so and so astrologer, etc. However, this person has said so and so. So many times I find astrologers saying a complete yes or a very hard closing, in the accounting language. Do a hard closing. this will happen, this will not happen. But that is something one as an astrologer needs to be careful. One needs to only predict the propensity rather than hard yes or a no. And I would always err to be on the side of positive rather than negative in an astrologer, because it is never say never. And even in our Jyotish, there are so many charts. There is a Chalit, there is a Kasp, there is a Janma Lagna, there is a Chandra, there is a Shodasha Varga, there is a Ashtaka Varga. So, though the country, so I follow two streams. I follow Krishnamurti Paddhat and the Parashar Paramparik or traditional Vedic Jyotish. But most of the times, 99% of the times, I corroborate and the final outcome is the same by both the methods. So I'm lucky to have two methods with me, and I corroborate with them, and the final answer is normally the same. It should be the same.
Okay,
I'll read one question. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
See, most nothing. The thing. See, most of the astrologers, they normally when they see the patrika and all, they are able to say whatever has happened in your life.
Yes.
To 100%.
Yes.
99%. But whatever is going to happen, they are not able to predict fully. Is it because of the karma?
Yes and no. So one is, as I said, a hard yes or no is anyway difficult. Secondly, yes, the decision making of that person. For example, very frequently I get a question, should I change my job? Okay. So what I will see his Mahadasha, I will see his Antardasha, I will see the Sukshma Antardasha, I will see his basic horoscope and tell him, yes, there is Yog and this is a good time to change your job. It's a good period. If you start searching, you will find one. That can be one answer. The second answer is no, wait till this time, wait till this period gets over. It's not a very good period. You may not get what you want. Wait for 6 months and then start searching. So, okay, if I tell in the first case, you can start searching, it's a good time. You will get a job, but he chooses for some reason not to. So that is again his decision making, right? Ultimately, astrology will give you a series of options. What you choose will lead to the result, either with a new job or not a job. Sometimes one can say, be careful, there is something going to happen. For example, a couple of years ago, somebody came to me for actually wanting to change a job. So I didn't see that person change, but I saw very clearly that it's likely that he might get a transfer within in a bad way, in the sense, like a demotion way, or might even lose a job. And he said, no, not possible. I've got like fantastic ratings and like overachiever, this, that, but it happened because the dasha was showing that. Now, I didn't say that will happen. I said, there's a chance, so be careful. Do your documentation on time. Kind of save your backside with all the email documentation and everything, because I worked in corporates, so I know how to ring fence ourselves. So in that sense, sometimes it's very easy to predict, sometimes it's not.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ashwini, there are a few more questions. I'm going to read out the question for the interest of everybody quickly. And and the one first question is that we've already answered this, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat your answer on this. This is whether there was one astrologer who was right on one case and wrong on the other. And so you've already explained that this is not about right or wrong of the astrologer, but it is about how the action is also taken. It's a combination of a lot of events that happen, and therefore the prediction comes right or does not come right. In any case, there are no hard-coded predictions rather than giving probabilities in terms of what can possibly happen, what is more probable going to happen, as we have already said that. One question which has been asked is about, people generally say Shani acha nahi hai, Mars acha nahi hai. Is it that I can balance these? Is there something that balances the malefic effects? Again, I think you've already answered this, that the Mahadashas and the individual smaller effects of all of this creates a totality of an effect. So again, this doesn't require a detailed answer. And I'm sorry I'm doing this for the interest of time, because we do have one more lecture left.
Yes.
Somebody has asked a very interesting question, which is about saying that you created a balance sheet, but when we first emerged out of the Almighty, when the Big Bang happened, so to speak, there was no karma. So how did the karma start? Where did the karma originate from? So
how do you start a company? You register with 100 rupee share or whatever. I don't know the current laws, but you registered a company, so you got registered. And then your karma started.
So, okay, the answer is actually in the Bhagavad Gita itself, where he says that we determine our future with the karma and guna. So our gunas were created as we were created. So the combination of our sattva, rajas, tamas, which can be infinite number of combinations, got created the instant we were created, and therefore obviously. So I am actually intentionally rushing because I can. And I've got this screen on.
Later on if there is time.
Yeah, and I've got the screen on which says change host, make Nilesh host for the meeting. And I'm waiting to click on that so that we can have Nilesh starting off. How do you, okay, this is interesting. How do you see astrology for a country? So you might want to keep your answer ready. We will take up the answer later. So that's a very interesting question. Praveen ji, I think she has answered the question already, where she says, she has told us that our past karma and the present action obviously ascertain our destiny. So our destiny is nothing but our free choice.
Yeah, and astrology will give you direction about your strengths, weaknesses, what are the possibilities. Yes. So you can be aware, you can take precaution, you can grab on the opportunity likely to come.
Okay,
but action has to come from you.
And an administrative question that has been asked. Yes, the presentation will be made available. It is being recorded. It will be made available to everybody.
Yes, sure.
Nilesh, all yours. I'm just going to change the host. Nilesh, you are on mute.
Namaskar. Thank you everyone for attending this session on Saturday evening for most of you. I will just directly get into my presentation, and let me time myself. So I'll time for like 25-30 minutes. And so people are not wondering how long this guy is going to go. You know, I'll exactly stop at that point. Okay, so I started sharing it here. Okay, so decisive dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana. Number of you, as Samirji mentioned before, or Banerjee sir mentioned before, that many of you have possibly listened to my talks. Many of you might have read my books. Many of you might have read my blogs and debates and so on. So this is a very high level summary. And hopefully, I mean, my goal here is to possibly give you something that you already know, possibly tell you something that you say, that's interesting, I didn't know that. And possibly to provoke you. You say, come on, this is just not possible. All right. And hopefully that gives us a few 10-15 minutes to get through some questions and answers. All right. So this is a quick summary of my 25-30 years of research. I started doing this. Again, I couldn't have given a name that I was doing research. It was my very much my personal curiosity through my right from the childhood, I would say, but especially say high school years and especially undergrad years, undergrad engineering right in Mumbai. So this goes through 25+ years of work, just a very high level summary. At the center, what you see is the axis of time. So today is where we are today, 21st century. And that arrow is the arrow of time for the future. If we go back, the zero refers to going back to the starting point for the calendar that we are familiar, the Gregorian calendar. Like say today being 27th February 2021. Okay, so going back 2000 years. And before that, that -5K and all that refers to 5000 BC, which means 7,000 years ago, 10,000 BC, 15,000 BC, and 20,000 BC. Against this, I started very specific one verse from the Mahabharata. This is when I was doing my master's in Canada, chemical engineering, of course, but nothing to do with Mahabharata. But I was just exploring something. And that one verse led to another. In fact, that one verse, I was, and a number of you have listened to it, then you have listened to this story 10 times. I get tired of telling this story 10 times, but it's very important that it's just a one shlok that I thought I may able to figure this out over a weekend. That took me 15 years, 15, from 1995 to 2009. But as it happens in all disciplines of science, that's what makes the revolutions. So finally, when I figured it out, it defined a very specific time. The most important part is that it said the Mahabharata war based on that reference can never happen, would not have occurred in the last 6,500 years. And why this is a big deal? Because everything that we just know from a hearsay, is what? Anyone asks us, how old is Indian civilization? When did the Mahabharata war happen? When did the Kali Yuga begin? It's 5,000 years. It's an extremely lazy and tamasic answer because we don't choose to study. We don't want to even ask the question, who came up with this 5,000 year number? Okay, it has no basis. So I started with that verse that gave me the clue, illusion that the Mahabharata war definitely happened more than 6,500 years ago. Then I extracted all the astronomy references because that was astronomy reference. The reference said Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Ya Chaisha Visuta Rajas Trailok Ke Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Taya Pesha Vasishta Prushtata Kruta. So it told me a certain time. Then I extracted every single astronomy reference from the text of Mahabharata. They amounted to more than 300. And then imagine you doing your crossword puzzle, okay, or solving a jigsaw puzzle or solving the Rubik's cubes. In that fashion, when I looked at all the observations in a scientific manner, in an objectively testable manner, the way we would do it in the lab and the way we do things in physics and chemistry, that led me to one specific year, and no other year is possible based on the Mahabharata text evidence. It is the year 5561 BCE for the year of Mahabharata Yuddha, Mahabharata war. Then I repeated the same thing, and it's not happening in the series. Like I was also studying, researching Ramayana for a long time, but it was the Mahabharata that gave me the success first. And it was actually a good thing because it really helped me in many ways do this for Ramayana. Interestingly, in case of Ramayana, to my surprise, and hopefully it surprises you, Ramayana is like much smaller compared to Mahabharata, like 1/4 or 1/5 of what Mahabharata is. So I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but in terms of astronomy, I extracted astronomy, meaning not to confuse with astrology, although the basis is same. And in the Indian tradition, it is Jyotish. The astrology is a Phala Jyotish part. Here, astronomy is we're talking about the movements and motions of the planets and whatnot. Seasons, everything that the planets change, planets govern, the moon, the sun, and everything else. I extracted 600 plus astronomy observations from the Ramayana text Valmiki Ramayana. It's very important. For a dating, it's a Valmiki Ramayana. You cannot go to other Ramayanas for historical purposes. And again, if you pull them together, like solving a jigsaw puzzle, solving a crossword puzzle, it leads you to a very specific year and no other year, 12,209 BCE, for the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha. So simply, if you go more than 7,000 years ago, it takes you to Mahabharata. If you go more than 14,000 years ago, it takes you to Ramayana. And relatively recently, which is say, I would say 5 years ago now, one professor from here asked me, like, can I use whatever I have done for Mahabharata Ramayana, can I do this to Rigveda? And I wasn't necessarily sure. Now I have done a lot of work on the Saraswati, very indirect work related to Mahabharata and Ramayana. And in Rigveda, there are astronomy references, but they were not, at least at that time, they were not like helping me solve the crossword puzzle. But what helped me is the evidence of Saraswati. And what that evidence tells you, told me, is that Rigveda, a very high level conclusion, the oldest portion of Rigveda are definitely older than 24,000 years. Okay, how old, we don't know exactly. So essentially here we have a civilizational narrative for 24,000 years. So if there's a one takeaway from my talk that every one of you would like to take and tell your friends in the social gathering, is that stop saying in Indian civilization is 5,000 years old. It's a very wrong statement. It's factually incorrect. It has no evidence basis. We can say with a full confidence that Indian civilization is definitely older than 24,000 years. I'm not saying only 24,000 years. Now, I started with astronomy and hydrology, which is a river science. But since then, actually, I have found evidence from every single discipline of science that you can think of. If the evidence exists, and if there is a way to match it with the descriptions of Rigveda, descriptions of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Therefore, just as a simple summary, I say thousands of empirical, objectively testable evidence from dozen plus different disciplines of sciences, very hard sciences. I'm not talking sociology and I'm not talking humanities disciplines. I'm talking of, and I'll mention that in one slide, so I'll not state those. So that's what we have, and this is my quick summary. So I did start with astronomy, but so that everyone can see this, is that this particular conclusion of, for example, for the Mahabharata dating or for Ramayana or for Rigveda, and I can show you a similar slide for Ramayana and Rigveda, so I won't show that. The conclusion is corroborated, scientifically speaking, corroborated in our ordinary language, validated, supported, and so on, from every single discipline of science that you can imagine. So oceanography, geology, seismology, archaeology, hydrology, climatology, agriculture, like science of agriculture, when it began, what's the evidence for the beginning of agriculture, domestication of animals, domestication of plants, Veda Shakha Pravachana, the Brahmanas, the Upanishad and everything, the side literature. The other epics, like for Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Ramayana, the Mahabharata helps. Rigveda, the relative chronology of Rigveda, the absolute chronology of Rigveda, the travelers' records from the Greek records and whatnot, genetics, the latest cutting edge science, the physical anthropology, the languages, the development of the languages, the names of the places, the names of the rivers and their origin and their connection with the language, the toponymy, the ornithology, chronology, paleontology, the animal kingdom and the loss of animal species. All that comes together. If the evidence exists and if it can be connected with the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Rigveda, it leads you there. So quickly, I'm going to walk you through the dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana. Quickly, do we have what it takes? It's very important. Many people will listen to this. Again, I don't think that would be an issue here, but they will say, typical Hindi mein, kuch samajh mein nahi aaya. Now, that is always a possibility, okay? Very much a possibility. Depends on what is your background knowledge. If somebody has no background in accounting and you send an annual report, reading annual report is an extremely boring exercise in that case. But not if you enjoy accounting, not if, those people who love that, you read Warren Buffett's letters to shareholders like a poetry. It is a poetry, right? So you have to have a background knowledge. Now, what does it take? Scientific acumen, logical reasoning, and Vyaptijnana. This is the formula I use. What you see in that triangle is essentially the logic of scientific method. This is how Kepler did his work, and Newton and Einstein and Maxwell and everyone did the same way, and same way with the Darwin and whoever you can think of. Now, this is, by the way, that's the basis of our modern science, but you can find this in just simple one line or two lines or three lines in our Indian Shat Darshanas, such as Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or Gautama's Nyaya Darshana. For example, Gautam would say, Pratyaksha Anumana Upamana Shabda Pramanani. What he just said is there in this triangle. Or if you ask Patanjali, Yoga Sutra, right? He says, Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani. And then he says what to do, but also what not to do and what causes the confusion. Then he says what not to do. Viparyayo Mithya Jnanam Atadrupa Pratishtham. If you don't follow this method, you will get false knowledge. And then says there are many people, I mean, all of us know it. Sometimes we are guilty of it. अरे मैंने यहाँ सुना, मैंने वहाँ पढ़ा, उसके बारे में आपका क्या opinion है? It's a waste of time. Don't ask somebody else for the opinion. If you read something and if you are truly curious, go to the bottom of it. He says, Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpa. You heard something, there is a Shabda Jnan, but it doesn't have a backing evidence. It leads to confusion, it leads to delusion. There are a few other things such as the scientific acumen is important, Tantra Yukti, ability to set the problem and try to look for the solution, and the logically drawing the proper inferences from the evidence. In Indian chronology, what you'll find, for example, archaeology is a wonderful field where people do a lot of hard work, but unfortunately, when time comes to draw the inference, they do the most disastrous thing. And that is because of the lack of scientific acumen, but also the lack of logical reasoning. Okay, I'll just go fast through this. So this is a quick scientific method here that I just mentioned. If you have a problem, to solve the problem, you propose a theory. Once you propose a theory, the theory leads to many predictions, just like the astrology prediction we talked about. And then you look for evidence. The evidence may exist in the form of a data, the existing data. You may create new experiments. You may find new evidence, natural observations. And then you see, do those predictions of the theory match with the evidence? If they do, then for now, at least we accept that theory as an explanation and we go through the circles and get to the next problem. This is a technical aspect. There is a psychological aspect which is also very important, which is to say Shraddha, Samshaya and Jidnyasa. And these all three are important. If you only have a Samshaya but no Shraddha, hard luck. If you have a Shraddha but no Jidnyasa, hard luck. Okay, so you need a good combination of this. So quickly I'm going to show you. So Samshaya, see again Bhagavad Gita. Again, Bhagavad Gita, if you think it's a religious in the sense of an Abrahamic religious scripture, it's not a scripture and it's not religious, by the way. Okay, it is very intellectual grantha. Samshaya can be of a mind, and when Krishna says Samshayatma Vinashyati, he is referring to that Samshaya of a mind that will lead to all destruction. But Samshaya of a buddhi is very much required. It is praised in all our Indian ancient narratives. Okay, and that leads to that Jnana Trupti, meaning you have to do something about it. Okay, you cannot leave it. You cannot outsource your Samshaya. You cannot outsource your Shraddha. And that's what partly like when Ashwini was possibly saying, you know, do the japa because you are doing it rather than getting somebody else to do something for you and not knowing what it is. It's like you just gave her money and you're hoping that the things happen. Okay, so Shraddha also has a gradation from Tamasic to Sattvic Shraddha, and the Sattvic is what is desired. That the Shraddha is very important, and it doesn't matter. I mean, people fight forever between Shraddha and the Shraddha. Guess what? All Shraddha is Andhashraddha until you have experience. Okay, so there is no difference. But any Shraddha, even right or wrong, leads to tremendous Karma Shakti if you have it. And then the Jidnyasa, so which is to say, just having a problem, I have this question for you. No, not very useful. Okay, even how you approach is also important. Bhagavad Gita talks about Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. See, in the old times, people used to go and approach the person who knew the stuff, doesn't matter which field, okay, with a reverence. Now it is like, you know, people come in a very challenging way. Oh, so you are saying this, now tell me this. No, the other person may not be interested in answering your question if you don't have the right attitude. You know? So the Jidnyasa also is important, but Jidnyasa with a very specific purpose. And just a simple example I'll give you is I get this question: oh, what was the height of Bhishmacharya? You know, that's a very idle question. It's a useless question. It wastes everybody's time. Now that can be a useful question. It depends on what problem you are trying to solve. Okay, so any question can be a useful question if there is a context. So that is a Saprayojana. If that question is solved, what is the benefit of it? What is it going to lead to? That we should know, like a phala, you know. And so if it's a Saprayojana as opposed to just a kutuhal, which is idle curiosity that is not desired, then it leads to something very useful. I will just go fast through this few words. The top right-hand corner is what is desired. The bottom left-hand corner is what is not desired. Okay, let's get into the Mahabharata. So I just mentioned, I extracted all the astronomy observations. Now, what was my theory? Remember, I showed you that 5-step framework, the triangle, and then the theory, evidence, explanation, prediction, inference, and then agama or background knowledge. The theory is simple. It has to be simple. If you see in the science, what you'll see, what did Newton say? That there is an attractive force between the bodies, even at a distance, right? That's just the theory. That's the theory. I mean, there is nothing more to Newton's theory. The math may be complex. What is my theory? All astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text are actual, factual, visual observations of the Mahabharata times. As simple as that. So if there is a Mahabharata, there is a description in astronomy, and if I'm claiming a certain time, like 5561 BC, I should able to show that that is true for 5561 BC. I extracted 300 plus references. I objectively tested them, logically drew the conclusion in solving that crossword puzzle. Okay, the simple logic of a crossword puzzle is if there are 5 blanks, the word has to have 5 letters in it, as simple as that. Okay, just a simple example of a logic. And a background knowledge, what is required? Very, very simple. You need to have a knowledge of astronomy. Now that may feel complex to some. Indian astronomy, modern astronomy, and the text of Mahabharata. You don't need anything else. Of course, the knowledge required to understand Mahabharata text is assumed here. Okay. So what did I do? I extracted those 300. Initially, when I did this in 2011, I only extracted 215. Every time I read Mahabharata, reread, I find more. So by now I have like 300 plus. What is beautiful is they all match for that 5561 BC. Now remember, Mahabharata is a kavya, Arsha kavya. Okay, same is Ramayana. So how do these references come? They come in the form of a nimitta, signs. Okay, they come in the form of a upamana because it's a kavya, analogies, metaphors, and they come in the form of a alankar, poetic embellishments. So keep that in mind. So I extracted the references. That is one step of scientific acumen. The other one is you have to classify. Now, classification can be in many different ways. I'll just explain you what was meaningful and useful in this case. The classification is such that first you find the approximate area. And then the second one you go for is the precise and accurate. So suppose somebody from America wants to come there and go to the headquarters of L&T. How would somebody give an instruction? He says, okay, fly to India or fly to Mumbai. And once you go into Mumbai, you say, okay, now take this, go towards Powai and whatnot, and take this road and so on. So the evidence in the blue is what takes you approximately into the right region. And the evidence in this orange one allows you to get to precisely and accurate to get number 5 of L&T or whichever gate person needs to be there. Okay. So what is important is that you start in the right region. If I'm looking for the headquarters of L&T, headquarters of some big company, but I'm thinking L&T in Atlanta, I will not be successful. I may find Coca-Cola headquarters or Delta Airlines headquarters, but not L&T headquarters. Number of you would know this humorous story. The drunkard is looking for his lost coin. The cops ask him, what are you looking for? He says, lost coin. He says, where did you drop it? He says, I dropped it 2 blocks away. Cops ask him, why are you looking for it here? And the drunkard says, well, because the light is better here. The reason I'm showing this is that is unfortunately the story of almost 99.99% of Indic researchers, whether they're studying Mahabharata, they're studying Ramayana for dating. Very unfortunate, but that's the story. So quickly, what I just showed you, that splitting it into 2 types, that is also like a vernier caliper. If you know this, you can relate to this. First, you take approximate reading, and on the secondary scale, you take the precise and accurate reading. So based on that, I'm going to give you a very high-level summary without taking you into the technicalities of astronomy. So again, our time axis, we are here 21st century. So when the first observation that I mentioned that I ran into in Canada, that Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha. So the Mahabharata text is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, the star Arundhati is seen to walk ahead, is walking ahead, has gone ahead of Vasishtha, whichever way you want to see that. Now, when I finally figured this out, that can Arundhati in principle ever walk ahead of Vasishtha? In 2009, I figured out that there is a specific time, and only during this specific time, sometime after 11,000 BCE, which is going back 13,000 years, and sometime only before 4508 BC, which is to say before 6,500 years from our time, Arundhati could be seen from the earth, northern hemisphere, from India, from Kurukshetra, or anywhere in the northern hemisphere, walk ahead of Vasishtha. Okay, so which means now if you put the Vijnana Buddhi, Tarka Shastra, Tantra Yukti, everything together, that tells you that Mahabharat war, if it has happened, must have happened between these times. Very recently, somebody else wanted to test if what I'm saying is correct, and that's how people need to do it. The Jidnyasa or Samshay should turn into action, Karma Shakti. He tried to validate using the latest data, like the 10-year latest data from what I had used. And actually, he verified that conclusion again, but now even he found a tighter interval, which is even nicer. Instead of saying L&T office is somewhere in Mumbai, now you're saying somewhere near northern Mumbai or somewhere near airport or something like that, okay? Which is good. And the year that I'm giving you, 5561 BC, just to show you reference, it's there. Now, if you look at just another set of evidence from Mahabharata, like Bhishma Nirvana, from the time Bhishma fell in the battle on the 10th day, and he was on the bed of arrows until the day of winter solstice, Uttarayan. Uttarayan of that time, not to be confused with our Makar Sankranta, 14 January, or even 21st December for that matter in our times, okay? What Mahabharata tells us is that he was on the bed of arrows for more than 92 days. And why is this important? You have to take this date and combine with the astronomy knowledge, and it gives you something marvelous. Okay, there's a huge evidence in the Mahabharata text in support of that more than 92 days for Bhishma on the bed of arrows. Okay, I'm just showing you the specific numbers. I'll just go fast through that. But the huge, powerful conclusion just from that Bhishma Nirvana evidence is this. If Arundhati told me it's somewhere here, I have to look for. Now, Bhishma Nirvana evidence is telling me you don't have to even look for that far. You have to look only between 4700 BC and 7000 BC. And if I combine that Bhishma Nirvana with other evidence from Mahabharata text, such as the phases and positions of the moon through 18 days of the war. So I'm showing the phases and positions here and exactly the references from the 18 days right here. So when I read something like 6.514043, that's a Bhishma Parva, Adhyay 51 verses 1443. So anyone can go and look at this and actually go to the book and refer to these. Of course, they are in my books. So I'll go fast. Multiple such different sets of references. If you keep on adding them, it takes you smaller, right to get number 5 of L&T. Okay, so 5561 BCE, that gives you a very narrow area of about 1500 years from 5000 BC to say 6700 BC, where one should look for the year of Mahabharata war. Now, still we haven't found 5561 BCE per se, right? Based on at least what I just showed you. And so how do we do that? I mean, there are 100 different ways using Mahabharata evidence to do it. But what I'm going to show you is that it's something that one has to get bit level deeper into the subject, like 20 levels deeper. Think of this as a puzzle. You might have seen this in your childhood or even now. These are individual 20 segments that gives you these 7 squares of the same size. And if I ask you as a puzzle, take out 3 and reapply them meaningfully and turn these from 7 to 5. Some people will say, yes, I love puzzles, I can do it right now. Other people will say this is impossible, cannot even happen. Some people will take some longer time. I'm going to give you a quick answer. So if you remove these 3, so the picture will look like this. And now we are going to take these 3 and reapply. So 1 here, 2 and 3. So I meaningfully reapplied those 3 and there is no idle hanging segment anywhere. And now I turn 7 squares of the same size into 5 squares of the same size. My point is why I'm showing you this, because that's how the Mahabharata evidence is. Number of you would know this story. You can take it allegorical as a metaphorical. You can take it literally. It doesn't matter. What matters is the evidence. So when Vyasadeva was ready to write, he wanted a very efficient typist, a shorthand person. And so he invited Ganesh. Ganesh came there, but Ganesh put a condition. He said, I will do this job only on the condition that I don't have to wait idly. You should continue to supply me the material. And Vyas agreed to that, but Vyas put a counter condition. And he said, unless you understand what I'm saying, you cannot start typing. Okay. And in that way, the whole Mahabharata Grantha was ready. Mahabharata tells us that it took 3 years to write this. It was written approximately 18 years after the war. And what was the nature of this grantha? It says Grantham Granthi, this is from Mahabharata, Grantham Granthi Tada Chakre Munir Gudam Kutuhalat. This grantha is full of twists. That second granthi is a twist. It's full of mysteries. It's full of puzzles. It's full of curiosities. And just a last slide on the Ramayana here quickly that I'm going to, sorry, Mahabharata I'm going to show you. Just to show you how rich is the astronomy evidence. For example, I'm going to show you 35 plus specific references. These are planetary references, Graha Lakshana, I mean Graha positions with respect to Nakshatra. And 5-6 of them out of that 35 can take you to 5561 BC. Any 5-6 of them, and all 35 plus will also take you to 5561 BC, nowhere else. Now, we are not going to go into the technicalities of astronomy. I mean, that will take what? I mean, I teach workshops and they go for 5 days. And people are more puzzled at the end of the 5th day than the first day, okay? But just to give you a flavor of it, how rich and how sophisticated and how precise and accurate the Mahabharata evidence is. Imagine Earth at the center. We are looking at the sky. Those number 1 through 27 or 28 are the nakshatras. Those are some reference stars in the path of the sun, the ecliptic. This is Saturn. Most of you would recognize that. Mahabharata says, at the time of Mahabharata war, it says, Bhagam nakshatra makramya surya putrena pidate. The nakshatra of a Bhaga, which is Purva Phalguni, Uttara Phalguni, was attacked by Surya Putra, Saturn. Or this is Mars. It says Magha Swangarako Vakra. Angarak is Mars. It did Vakra near nakshatra Magha, number 6. Okay. Or it says Shravancha Brahaspati. So Mars did that to Magha. Exactly same thing was done by Jupiter near nakshatra Shravan. Or Mars did it again, that Vakra thing. Krutva Changarako Vakra Jesthaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshaya Manyeva, where near Nakshatra Jeshtha and Nakshatra Anuradha, 13-14. Or that same Mars, Nunam Madbhayam Krishna Kuruna Samupastitam Visheshane Vashneya Chitra Pidiyate Gra. That Mars was specially in a very unique fashion was afflicting Trasde Rata, something like to Nakshatra Chitra. Okay, or now again another description. Samvatsarasthainancho Graho Prajulito Vibho Vishakhayo Samipasto Brahaspati Shaneshcharo. For a year, Samvatsara, Saturn and Jupiter were in the vicinity of Nakshatra Vishakha, number 12, and they were shining brightly. Now, if you know astronomy, some of you, that is referring to the retrograde motion. They have become steady and they're shining brightly, brighter than they shine otherwise. That happens during retrograde. So I'm putting a RR there. Okay. Or you have a descriptions of sun and moon afflicting nakshatra number 28, that Rohini there, or Saturn doing the same thing. Now, sometimes the nakshatras are referred to their devatas. So Rohini, devata is a Prajapati, and it says, Mahabharata says, Prajapatyam cha nakshatra graha tikshna mahadyati, Shaneshchara pidiyati pidiyan pranikodikam, or Saturn or Jupiter is doing the same thing on the 17th day of the war. Okay, you can see the descriptions for the Mercury, which is a Buddha, or such a beautiful descriptions of the retrograde motion. Again, I'm just mentioning, assuming there are some people who are bit into astronomy, they will definitely find it more exciting. The retrograde motion of the Mars, such a beautifully described when, where, and in what fashion. It says, Dhruvam Prajulitam Goram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Cheva, between Chitra and Swati, 10 and 11, Chitra Swatyantare Cheva, Dishtita Parushagraha. And after doing this, it was there for 6 months. Okay, retrograde, when it goes in retrograde, it's there for 4 or 5 months when Mars does that. Then it says, Vakran Vakram Krutvam Cha, Shravane Pavaka Prabha. So now after that, it came near Shravana Nakshatra number 18. Brahma Rashir Samavutta Lohitango Vyavastita. And on the first day of the war, it aligned very nicely along Brahma Rashi, which is Nakshatra Abhijit, Nakshatra Vega. I'll just mention one and then I'll fast forward. Similar retrograde motion is described for Venus, Shukra. Shukram Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Saita Pratyudikshite. If you have seen some of my simulations on computer or from the astronomy softwares, 5561 BC, you'll see the Venus came near Proshtre Purvapade, which is what? Purva Bhadrapada, and turned north, made a parikrama. Shukram proshtapade purve samaroye vishampate uttaretu parikramya. Parikrama, the way we do parikrama in the mandir. It just made exact circle like this. That is how Shukra goes retrograde. Okay. And actually on and on. We can just go through the conjunctions. We can go through specific combinations, positions of the moon, positions of the sun, phases, etc., the planets, and all that leads to the specific year. There is actually a list that I made. I called it, now, again, the professional, the corporate professionals would love this. In mergers and acquisition, we talk about the poison pills, right? I just translated that as a Ashtavisha Gutika. Okay. Any Mahabharata researchers, because after listening to me, somebody is going to say, but yeah, so-and-so says another year. Anyone saying that, you can ask these 8 questions, okay, and see what their answer is. If any one of these questions, the answer is no or a wrong, then you can be confident that that cannot be the year of the Mahabharata war, okay. Let's quickly tell you, this is a metaphor. This is not to be taken as a political cartoon, although if you like, you may take it. This is the power of that 5561 BCE, or the research that I ended up doing, because I'm saying this word carefully, because I don't feel like I did it, although I remember doing it, as if like someone is getting it done through you. But the point is, every other Mahabharata researcher with a different claim right now is in this dilemma. Okay, so you will find, while they don't agree with each other, if the discussion comes for a 5561 BC, right from the very famous decorated Indic researchers with awards and titles and Padma awards and whatnot, and down to someone, a newbie, you will find if they have a date which they like to claim other than 5561 BCE, even if they don't agree among each other, they cannot see face to face. You will see them standing on the podium and holding each other's hands. This is, I'm just saying metaphorically. And some of the years I have given at the bottom as many alternate claims. There are 130 plus different claims. Just keep that in mind. Quickly on the Ramayana, this is going to be very fast and easy. Exactly same method. The method doesn't need to be changed. All astronomy descriptions of Valmiki Ramayana are actual factual visual observations of Ramayana times. Those many close to 600 astronomy observations, exactly same method, astronomy plus Valmiki Ramayana. Similar way of splitting it. First find the approximate one, that is the blue, and then the orange one, which allows you to get precise and accurate. A similar method. I'll just tell you this 4, and then I'm going to stop. What you are seeing here is Earth at the center. Sun is going around as seen from the Earth, and you can also see the moon. The positions that I'm showing you for the sun and moon and the nakshatras are for the day of Rama Janma. Okay, that is 29 November 12,240 BCE. You don't have to focus on that. The point I'm saying is, even if we pull 6 references out of that Valmiki Ramayana, 600 plus, it takes you to 13th millennium BC, which is to say more than 14,000 years ago. Right now, if you remember, our Ram Navami will come in just a couple of months here. And what is the time? It's very hot. It is the second part of the Vasanta Rutu, okay, close to Grishma, and very hot. But Ramayana did not happen in our times. If you go to Ramayana descriptions, these are beautiful descriptions of a very pleasant times, that month of Chaitra. And why is that? Because of the astronomic phenomenon of precession of the Earth's axis. The descriptions of Chitra are like descriptions what we find in our times of like August, September, October. Okay, some of the pleasant times, everywhere it's all green, the peacocks are dancing, the clouds are pouring rain. Iti bruvandamudita pratyanandana nupanupam vrishtimantam mahamegham nardanta iva barhina. The peacocks are dancing, okay? That is the time. To find Chitra, to match that season, we have to go back by 14,000 years. Or this is the observation made from Nashik, made by Lakshmana, okay, when they are at a Panchavati. It is the time of Hemanta Rutu, which means what? December, November, December. And he's saying, Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushyanita Himaruna. The sun is setting during this Hemanta Rutu on a Pushya Nakshatra. In our times, it sets on a Mula Nakshatra. Again, if you use the astronomy knowledge, it will tell you have to go back 14,000 years. Or just like when we start the, Chaturmas, around Ashadi Ekadashi, at least in the Mumbai context, you can relate to that, to Kartik Ekadashi. But around India too, of course. Similarly, Bharat is making such vows, and Bharat is making at the Ashad, but not the Ashad month. He is doing on the Ashad Nakshatra. And that again takes you back to 14,000 years, the beginning of a rainy season. The Mahabharata time, sorry, the Ramayana times had the two brightest stars as our pole stars, one in the south, one in the north. And the earliest that ever happened, latest, I should say, going from our times backwards, we have to go back again 14,000 years. And those descriptions comes into the Valmiki Ramayana. Okay, so one had to go all the way to say Kanyakumari if somebody wanted to see the star Canopus during the Ramayana times. That's what exactly Sugriv is saying here. You have to go to the southern part of Kerala, that verse below there, to see Agastya. Now we can see Agastya, Canopus star, even from Delhi. Okay, and then you can also see this, that the Ashwin, the month of Ashwin, our Navratra that we see now, that we do in September, October, or the Sharat season or late Sharat season, that was happening, that the Ashwin was happening in the Vasanta Rutu, like our current time almost, like a month of Falgun in our times. And there is a pole star, Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramarshya Archishmanta Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshina. The brightest star is the pole star of Ramayana times, that is that verse. So just even the 6 verses will take you to 13 millennium BC, 14,000 years ago. I'll go a bit fast through this, just I went over my time here. You can combine the astronomy evidence, but you can also combine the evidence on the ground, such as paleontology, such as geology, geophysics, geochemistry, hydrology, morphodynamics of rivers, how the rivers are changing their paths, and all of that. And you can go through similar. Now you got the pattern. So I put the hydrology reference first, and now I'm putting the astronomy references, putting the constraints, and it's telling me you have to go look for in between these numbers. Final number is there. And within that, using some additional evidence, the comet that Lakshman saw when they were leaving for Lanka from Kishkinda, and that 500 plus evidence, that takes us to 12,209 BC. Okay. Now quickly, so what do you do with it? I mean, either you can accept it on the Shraddha and then start sharing with others. That's a perfectly right thing to do. But then somebody else will come and tell you another date. And now what do you do? Okay. Therefore, if you have an interest, I would encourage you, and not just for my research, any research, is to get a couple of levels deeper and see if you can make sense out of it for yourself. Okay. So there is a way to do this logically. There is a way to do it scientifically. There is a way to understand from an epistemology point of view, how our knowledge grows. Okay. So you can accept it on the Shraddha, and that's perfectly fine. But you can also study deeply and be convinced about it. That is a Swadhyaya and Pradnya. Or you can critique it. You said, Nilesh, what are you telling us? It's unacceptable. I don't agree with it. And here is why. So you can critique it. You can critique it brutally, logically, and that takes tapasya, because that means you have to understand what I have done. You have to do Purva Paksha of my work. You must understand astronomy, and you must understand Mahabharata Ramayana. And this is not to scare you why you shouldn't do it, but this is rather to encourage you that you should do it. Okay. Then one more thing you may do, just like what I ended up doing. There were people who had proposed Mahabharata date, Ramayana date, but when I looked at there, it did not make sense to me. So actually what I ended up doing is proposing a alternate and a better claim. I am claiming it is a better claim, but it doesn't stop anyone from coming up with something better if they think they are equipped to do it. So they may present an alternate and a superior claim. And just jokingly, I say, but people will not many times will do any of these 4, and they will just ask something that is irrelevant. And then jokingly, or a corporate speak, I should say, I tell them, take a hike, go take a hike. This is Osha Atma Avinashyati. That's what we talked about. If you are in India, and most of you are in India, these are my books published through Subbu Publications. Subbupublication.com. If you go, you can order them online. If you are outside India, then these are also available through Amazon. So this is my last slide. Let me see. I'll stop sharing. And we might have gone over time, but if we have some time more, and if there are any questions, I would be very happy to respond to questions or even objections. Thank you. Samirji?
Yes, I was just reclaiming host so that I could manage stuff.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you could do it. Very good. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Questions from anybody, please?
Nilesh, I think it is mind-boggling what you just now said, my God, I mean, wow, we can imagine how much efforts have gone into this to come to this level of, conclusions that you have drawn. And, only one thing which I had in my mind, one big dilemma, whether these Mahabharata and Ramayana, they were epics, pure epics, or actually they happened. And now I think it came out very loud and clear that they did happen, and you have proved it, by virtue of exact timelines. So that's great, really great.
Yeah, and Banerjee sir, I will add one more thing. Not that you ask a question, actually you said in a very positive way, but many of us, many of the Indians or many of the people around the world, see, they will always ask the question, like when I start telling them about when the Mahabharata war happened, when the Ramayana happened, they said, well, but before even you do that, I have a question, did it even happen? I mean, is it just a story or is it a history? And that's not a wrong question, but I'll tell you what is the problem with it. Those same people, I turn around and just as a way of education, I ask them, what do you think of Alexander the Great? I mean, forget the great part, whether he's great or not, that could be an argumentative issue. But did Alexander exist or did Alexander happen? They say, yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, everyone knows that. I said, everyone knows that as information. Same thing for Krishna and Rama also. But do you have a evidence? It will be very interesting to just, I'm going to pose that question or just statement. How many of you know, I mean, on this call here, that when it comes to Alexander the Great, because all of us, I mean, around India, I don't know why, we are somehow mistakenly stuck in this archaeology evidence. Where is archaeology evidence?
Yeah.
I'm happy to tell this news that say, if it's Alexander the Great, of a Socrates or Pythagoras or Jesus, there is zero archaeological evidence, zero, zilch, no archaeological evidence anywhere about these individuals in the world. What is it that tells us, oh yeah, they existed? No, all that knowledge comes to us from the books written by somebody else. And I'm not saying we should not trust that knowledge. On the other hand, what, for example, I have done and many others have done before me, like Lokmanya Tilak and S.B. Dikshit and Professor Iyengar, Raghavan, there are many other individuals, that we did not trust what was written in the book, say even the Mahabharata. So when Mahabharata said Arundhati went ahead of Vasishtha, in a bhakti fashion, I did not say if Vyasa is saying it, it must have happened. I said if Vyasa is saying it, but I don't see it, why is it that? Or is it possible to verify what Vyasa is saying? And that's why it took 15 years. It may not always take 15 years. Some things happen faster. So the reason I deliberately mentioned this is because, unfortunately, and not the common man, I'm just saying, our Indic researchers, even the pro-India researchers, are also unfortunately stuck in the this whole paradigm of archaeology. And they don't understand, they do a lot of hard work, but even when they pull the archaeology evidence, they draw the wrong inference. Like if you know this humor, one person, it's a very, what you call PJ, like faltu joke or whatever you say, but there was a cockroach and in the lab, he cut one leg and says, cockroach, you please walk. You might have heard this humor, Then next day he did the second one, says, cockroach, please walk. And when he cut the last leg and cockroach was still walking with the one leg, scrolling, and the last one, and he says, cockroach, walk. Cockroach did not walk. So far, so good. Now he writes the inference in his diary. He says, when you cut all the legs of the cockroach, cockroach cannot hear you anymore, cannot listen to you anymore. That is the kind of thing. I told you this humor for a reason. That is how, unfortunately, what is happening in archaeology, Indian archaeology. So they do a lot of hard work. They pull the data, they date it, but then they draw the wrong inference.
Nilesh, I have a question. Without doubting that Mahabharata happened and Ramayana and all Ram was born, I want to know from you what other researchers have found. You see, like your time period of 12,000 BCE, what is the range?
Great question, Adarshiji. Yeah. for Mahabharata, the range is from 400 CE, which is to say 1600 years ago, to 7300 BCE. Okay. So now the one who are saying 400 CE, they are not saying Mahabharata happened. To them, like many of the professors in Western academia, you will say, to them, Mahabharata means because they don't believe Mahabharata is a history. And if you ask them what is their evidence, they say, well, come on, I'm a professor at Columbia. I mean, why do I need to give you evidence? The fact I'm a professor at Columbia, isn't that enough? I mean, that's the arrogance they have. And this is not I'm telling you some story. You can get them on the YouTube saying this. Like Professor Sheldon Pollock, one time he's saying, like literally, his video is like this, 30 seconds. He says, well, I say the Ramayana happened in 150 BCE, which is to say 2000 years ago. And says, why do I say that? Because I can. Okay. So that's for Mahabharata, from 400 BC to 7300 BC. For Ramayana, you will hear typically, again, if you take Sheldon Pollock, then 150 BC through my time, which is 14,000 years ago. And then in our traditional sort of a Bhakti tradition, or again, I would say, I'm separating Bhakti tradition, but I'm saying some people who will just read a statement in Purana of some Kali Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and they say this happened million years ago. So you also have people who will say million years ago. And my point is nothing wrong with any claim as long as you have evidence. Like Christopher Hitchens, it's known as a Hitchens razor, which says any claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Yes, that's right. So I have a supplementary question.
Please.
Do we have time for that? So the evidence that there was an advancement in science, we have Pushpak Viman and all this. Is there any evidence found or anything which you can relate to that?
We can find enough evidence that will tell us that indirect evidence that we meaning we as a humanity in the past had made tremendous progress. And I just don't mean India at all. India definitely so. Do we have a physical evidence of what you say, the Pushpak Viman? No. I mean, I'm not aware of any. But we have, say, just astronomy is a phenomenal field. For example, just to give you an idea, that these two pole stars, the bright pole stars that I mentioned of Ramayana times, they are also mentioned in Surya Siddhanta. And the positions of the sun, I mean, I'm not getting too deep into astronomy, but the apogee and perigee, like the closer to the earth, closer to the sun, and so on. And what is the effect on the season? I mean, this is something right now, see, all of us on the call right now, if we are left with our knowledge today, but no other external knowledge, and left with all the instruments we want, we may not be able to figure it out for the next 500 years with our brains. But that is figured out 14,000 years ago, and actually much longer, the latitudes and longitudes. So I'm just telling from astronomy.
That is one evidence, yes.
Right. Same thing, medicine, like see Ayurveda, like and world medicines. Like, how did they know? I mean, it's through trial and error, empirical, somehow they figured it out. But it's very fascinating. So we don't find the evidence, but think of it. We don't find evidence for things that people are claiming even 400, 500 years ago. So with the time, we may find, we have not found evidence.
Excuse me, I have a question. How do you arrive at astronomical configurations so many years back? I mean, are there any panchangs or something that go that far back?
Panchanga doesn't go, but for a good question, by the way. So say Surya Siddhanta, and again to answer what indirectly answer what Adarsh ji also asked, like Surya Siddhanta equation of the sun. What that means is to able to predict the exact position of the sun in the sky at any location, any day, any time. That equation, for example, because it's simple, people can understand, is in a Surya Siddhanta text. Do you know when it is most accurate? Because usually you can imagine it is most accurate when it was developed. because over time, because of the astronomy parameters are changing, it's going to get worse and worse. It is most accurate at the time of Mahabharat war. It's accurate at 5500 BCE. Okay, so yes, there are formulas. In fact, until the Western Europe came in contact with Surya Siddhanta text, they did not even imagine it is possible to have formulae to predict the positions. Not many people know that. Until then, all around the world, the positions of the planets were done by a very complicated geometric methods, drawing lines, drawing triangles, drawing chords and whatnot. Now they have formula. After Newton, we have formulas. But Surya Siddhanta is writing formulas which we can show that they were written 7,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. I mean, there is a Dr. Anil Narayanan, former ISRO scientist. Now he's in Washington, D.C. He has done wonderful work. It is already published in many papers and books. My work, some of my co-researchers. Surya Siddhanta takes us back to 40,000 BC in terms of some of the recorded positions or readings in Surya Siddhanta.
So these formulas tell you past combinations and also future combinations?
Yes, and modern, yeah, that is correct. And modern astronomy. So after Newton, after Lagrange, and now all the Hubble telescope data. So what we see, the formulas exist, but this data is used to refine those formulas. Yes, so we can go future. Now what happens is, how accurate it is, if you go 10,000 years in future, it is still reasonably accurate. There are some things which get inaccurate. For example, the eclipses. If you, from today, if you go outside in future or in the past, beyond 2000 years, the eclipse data, the Grahan data gets erroneous. And you know why? Because the most difficult motion to determine in the astronomy, it will surprise many of you, is the motion of the moon. This motion of the moon is so difficult to determine. Newton spent 15 years. Newton's theory was ready, but he couldn't come out because the moon motion was not yielding to him. So other motions will be perfect, and we know how to make corrections for the moon also.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Nilesh, just a quick question. Is Arundhati visible by naked eye?
For a good 2020, I said yes. I mean, mine is not 2020, and still I can see Arundhati. Also, see, in Mumbai, it may be difficult with so much of a light, so much of a light pollution, the physical pollution. But if you go to countryside, I mean, if you go to Matheran, for example, yeah, you will able to see, especially the clean skies. Yes, you can see it, and it's yeah, the answer is yes, you can see it. And especially those times, see, right now we have almost lost connection with our sky. But people just knew everything. And
so the follow-up question actually to this is, in the entire set of 300 in Mahabharata and 600 plus in the Ramayana references, have you come across any references, astronomical references, which in general would not have been observable by the common, just naked eye? Are there
many? Yeah, great question, Samirji. Many. For example, even the Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha, in principle, can be seen with a naked eye. But to be very confident, actually, you need something of a telescopic instrument.
So this is in follow-up to the Pushpak Viman question that I think, while we may not have actual physical evidence of a telescope existing at that point of time, even I have seen such references, and therefore that's why I raised this question, that most probably we have a lot of indirect evidence that talks about a fairly highly developed civilization which existed at that point of time.
Very true. Extremely highly sophisticated civilization in any discipline of our life that you can refer to, meaning medicine, agriculture, domestication, travel, navigation, astronomy, astrology. nutrition, you name it. So I agree with you. See, they are talking about the Sukshma Drishti. If you, now this is a latest text, but Sankhya, it comes from a Sankhya Darshan, which is Ati Sukshmat, Ati Durat. See, if you know the problem, the technology can find a solution. There is a mention of a mirrors, Adarsha. There is a mention of a mirrors in Ramayana. There is a mention of mirrors in Mahabharata. As soon as you mention mirrors, it's not a much further ride to get to telescopes and microscopes.
True.
Right?
True. So I'm going to call an end to this session, because otherwise Nilesh and Ashwini, I don't know what time it is in Atlanta, but we can take you to bedtime, your bedtime.
No, for our nap time, you mean? Our nap time. No, it's a 10:20 here. So that,
no. So that's why I said your bedtime, meaning your 10 o'clock. Another 12 hours for a video is not going to be very difficult. We have enough questions, enough discussions, but I'm so happy that you have mostly agreed to share your presentation also. So if you can, Ashwini, especially if you can share your presentation, and Nilesh, if it is okay with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I've just shared my email ID with Ashwini. You can take it from her, and we can, if you can pass it on to me. What I will do is I will circulate it in this entire group.
Very good.
I also need to thank, firstly, I want to thank Parthoda for having connected with you, Ashwini, and because of you also with Nilesh, and having made this possible. Otherwise, this would not have been an opportunity available to all of us. So thank you, Parthoda. The second, I definitely want to thank both of you, so that you've taken out so much time. I'm sure Saturday is not a day for, it's also a free day for all of you also. And so therefore, I thank both of you for whatever you have brought here to this and enriched both of us, all of us. Ashwini, I liked personally, and this is very, very personal, I have no belief in destiny. And I have no belief in destiny. I'm not saying no belief in astrology, because astrology is a predictive science, which is telling me that if to use physics, if my trajectory is in a particular direction, where is the ball going to fall is how I'm calculating. That's all that astrology is doing. The trajectory was determined by me myself, right? Either in this life or with the past. Gurudev used to always keep saying that, and in all his books, he says that every moment now we are creating the blueprint of our future. So this moment we have a choice, and this choice is obviously free will. And you brought out one of my favorite shlokas in the entire Bhagavad Gita. I mean, the whole text is my favorite, but then Uddharetu Atmani Atmanam is my favorite, because it actually is so very defining about the fact that we have the liberty to choose our own future. So thank you, Ashwini. And Nilesh, I liked I've read, as I said, I've read all your books. I am a big fan of yours. And I love the fact that, as you rightly said, that archaeology is very so-called subjective science as compared to a much harder science of astronomy, calculating the movement of the stars based on the precision of the equinoxes. They're calculating them, and I know the sort of software, you've mentioned it in your books, the sort of software that you have used, which is, I think, NASA grade software, which you have been using to do these predictions. So I really don't care if everybody gangs up on you and holds hand to say that you're wrong. At least from our perspective and from the group here, I think we are all in awe of the sort of depth of work that you've done. And I also picked up a few interesting new things that you have mentioned. So I'm going to look at that, and I'll come back to you later on those.
Sure.
And finally, I think I have to thank all the 27 right now participants who are still on, because in general, and I told this to Parthoda, we had 80 registrations. So I was saying that most Zoom meetings land up with 10, 15 people. This is an indication of everybody's interest and the fact that they have put in so much time. So thank you, everybody, for having been part of this. Parthoda, if you allow me, can I end this?
Yeah, please. Thank you so much, Ashwini, Nilesh.
Thank you, sir.
Many thanks for
thank
your
you,
time.
everyone.
very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ashwini.
Partha and Samir, thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for organizing it.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.